How do I get my husband to be nicer to me? My name is Paul Friedman. I founded the Marriage Foundation, and I want to help you with this. And I'm not going to give you a simple answer, and I'm probably not going to give you the kind of answer that you're finding in other places. I have a different approach to marriage than most people in that I don't believe in fixing things. I believe in fixing marriages, because my philosophy is very simple, that if the marriage is working right, if all of the parts are fitting together, the communication, the self-respect, the mutual respect, all of these aspects of marriage, if you're in tune with how it's supposed to work, then your husband's automatically going to be nicer to you, and you're not going to be asking that question, and you'll be blown away by how wonderful he is to you. It's very rare for a man just to be ill-natured, and that's what you're dealing with. And even if that is what you're dealing with, if you happen to marry a grumpy guy, still, you can make adjustments on your end that will change things dramatically without becoming a doormat or a slave to his ego and demands, because that's not really cool. So let's talk about this marriage thing and the dynamics of it, because it's really necessary to come back to the most basic question of all. And that is, why did you get married in the first place? What were your expectations? Because most of us never ask that question of ourselves. We don't go, I'm thinking about getting married because it seems like everyone does, but I'm not sure if I want to. Why would I want to? Well, you wanted to because you wanted to be happier. And whatever reason you may or may not have come up with back then, you just can't argue with you wanted to get married to be happier. I mean, who gets married? Let's make it a binary choice. Who gets married to be less happy? And then the question comes up, well, does marriage provide happiness? What does provide happiness? So that's not so difficult a question to answer, because essentially we're individual souls. You're a soul. You have a body, you have a mind, but you're a soul. And I'm not selling some religious thing. This is just the way it is. And what is a soul? It's spiritual. Well, what else is spiritual is love. Love is probably the most spiritual thing there is. How do you define spiritual? Well, you could say love, you could be cute and say love defines spiritual. But the difference between spiritual and material is that you can't see, touch, smell. You can't use your five senses to perceive that which is spiritual, yet you know for sure it exists. Who doesn't know that it exists? Who doesn't believe in love? Everybody recognizes love. Even atheists who claim that there's no such thing as spiritual. We came out of fire billions of years ago, and it's whether you agree with their interpretation of life or not, they even have to admit that love is really something special. In the psychological world, they call it an abstract thought, but it's a lot more than a thought. It's a deep feeling that you cannot pretend doesn't exist. If you have children, you really know what I'm talking about, because when they're asleep, and the little monsters are no longer being little monsters, your heart just opens up to them. What is that all about? It's a very spiritual thing. It's love. And when you got married, you experienced love. Before you got married, you experienced love. Unfortunately, we're not taught about love. So when we have these experiences of love, and we all do, there's no one who doesn't at some point feel love. And when you do, because the mind hasn't been taught what is this all about, it rejects it. You go, oh, on some level. Maybe it's a subconscious, occasionally it's a conscious level. Women tend to feel love much more than men because of the biology of a woman is designed to care for their offspring. And so nature has given women this shortcut to their heart, right? Because that's where love exists. It doesn't even exist in the mind. Love is here. So now that we're talking about why you got married, to be happier, and how do you get happier, connect the dots. You get happier by experiencing love. In fact, when you experience love, there is no happiness that compares to it. You could get a brand new car. Someone could give you a brand new house out of the blue. And after a while, you get used to it. But there's one thing you never get used to: love. Love is so amazing, isn't it? So cool. So that's why you got married, and that's why your husband got married. Now, in a way, we're still, because we are intertwined, we are spirit and nature together. Our spirit is that heart that I'm talking about, but the nature is the material body. The material body is biological. It has its demands. You can recall from your earliest school learning about what is one thing that always defines life. Every cell. It's the drive to survive, isn't it? Whether it's a single cell amoeba, or whether it's the complex body of a human being, it wants to survive. It has an intelligence and it wants to survive. So we are a soul combined with a body. It's spirit and nature kind of dancing together. And it all comes together in the mind. So the mind wants love, but it also needs to protect itself at the same time. And here's where we get into trouble. This is right where we all get into trouble. So what happens is the heart, you, the soul, you want to give your love. You do. You want to experience love by giving it, not so you get it back. Of course, you want to receive it, but you want to give it. But you're afraid to. Fear is the component of the drive to survive that prevents us from being souls while we're walking in this dangerous world. Right? Follow me here, because this is pretty important stuff. So you, the soul, naturally want to give love. In your little secret moments, you can express love that no one hears about with abandon. But in the world, if you did that, you would be taken advantage of left and right. It's a dangerous world. However, you got married, and the two of you went into a bubble. You never learned these things. You're learning it now. You went into a bubble. Just the two of you are supposed to occupy this bubble. I call it the sacred space of marriage, and the reason I do is because we're essentially souls. We get to be souls in this bubble, this container of two, and you're protected. when you know what you're doing, when you realize this is your bubble. And then you're able to build this foundation of trust, of connection, of friendship that allows you to express love without inhibition. Isn't it so? Doesn't that make sense to you? So what happens? Why isn't your husband nice to you? Because what's happening, for sure, is his drive to survive. That part of him, the material part of him, feels it has to be protected. And for a man, that can come out in the form of very aggressive behavior. Because where a woman's nature, based on her biology, is to be nurturing, protective, mediate everything, work through things, a man is like attacking you or receiving you. It's not so simple for a man. It's his nature. It's designed by biology. Now he can override it, and we want to give you the tools that tell him it's okay to override his defensiveness, because that's all that's happening. He was nice to you before you got married. Now he's not so nice to you because he's afraid to be. Or he's mad at you because he's not receiving that which he got married for. Because you're not getting it. Why would he be getting it? You remember, you got married to be happy, and that thing that brings happiness is love. Well, is that the major component of your marriage, love? Obviously not. So you as an individual, especially because you're the woman, and so you're already connected to your heart, you could lead the way in this. Now, I've made it simple because when you're nice to your husband in a way that he understands, you can't be nice according to your desire to achieve niceness because you're not him. You have to attune yourself to what makes him feel loved. So there's a number of things that most women do wrong. Most people do wrong in marriage because of the idiocy put forth by people who don't know how to be married, don't know how to create a loving environment. So one of the big things is arguing. There seems to be this attitude. You know, I'm going to divert for a second. The Marriage Foundation, which I founded, has a lot of beautiful services. One is a free service where you could write into the counselors, it's free, and get a response. Now, one of the things that we get pretty often is we don't argue correctly. And it's like saying we don't beat ourselves up correctly. My philosophy is very simple. You don't argue. But in your marriage you have, right? You don't be critical towards one another. But in your marriage, you have been. You've condemned one another. You've made fun of each other. You've hurt each other's feelings. So these are the things that gotta go. All of these negative things that never produce happiness have to go. Then the next thing you do is you shift your focus onto proactively infusing love and happiness into your marriage. In other words, giving your husband love the way you should be. Now, I'm not going to give you a list of things to do because that doesn't work. The reason why it doesn't work is because we are creatures of habit. Our habits dictate how we behave. And habits are interesting things. You have the outer habits right here. Okay, someone is prone to get angry. It's an outer habit. Underneath that one habit, there's another line of a bunch of habits that contribute to that, and under those, there's others. I've developed a system to nip all that in the bud, and you need to do something like that. You have to change who you are. Everyone goes, wait a minute, why can't I just start showing more appreciation, which is an act of love? And you can learn the rules like that by reading one of my books, because I simplify everything. And in your case, that he's just not nice to you, that might be the best thing for you to do, is just get either one of my books, because I go into a lot of detail. You know, I used to be a divorce mediator. I used to be a divorce mediator. And then I shifted my practice. And the first thing that I did, because I was an expert in mediation, negotiation, proper communication for discussion purposes, so I thought this is pretty simple. I'll just lay out the do's and the don'ts. So in my books, you have the do's and the don'ts. Don't criticize, don't complain, don't condemn. And then the do's: smile, show appreciation, express loyalty, all of these do's and don'ts. Of course, in the books, I also explain good communication skills for marriage, which is very different than communication skills for going into the drugstore and getting your prescription, or arguing with a policeman who pulls you over. Very different skills. And so I've gotten into that too. And that might be all you need, where you turn your marriage around just by learning how. How do I make this marriage happy? If you're not sure, write into one of our counselors. Like I said, it's a free service. Now, what's going to happen if you do this? If you do this, he may not reciprocate immediately, but he'll soften, and eventually he'll be nice to you, because how could you be mean or not nice to someone who is always nice? Now, there are those who might say, well, you would just be making concessions that turn you into a doormat. No, it's not like that. You can't be a doormat to your husband. You married him in order to express love to him. You promised. So I don't even know who went first, whether you stopped being nice to him first or he stopped being nice to you first. I don't really care. My philosophy is, starting from now, you could change the dynamics with an expectation that I don't think anyone else talks about. Your expectation for your marriage should be happiness that is growing every single day, producing an environment in which the blooms of love can flower. More and more blooms. Have you ever had a rose bush, for instance? You know, you start by cutting it back. You give it the right fertilizer, the right environment. And the first time you get a few blooms, then you get more and more and more. You cultivate it. And you cultivate your marriage the same way. Marriage isn't meant to be something you just do and it's done. You cultivate the love, the happiness within your marriage so it's ever expanding on a daily basis. That's not just a philosophy. I've been doing this for 2 decades. This is what you should be expecting. And in order to make it a reasonable expectation, you learn how. This isn't rocket science. This is really doable. So hopefully you get the idea. You now know that if you want your husband to be nicer to you, what you do is you change the very dynamics of your marriage. You take these steps. And it's hard to do it on your own just by listening to a video. So spend the few dollars for a book. It's well worth it. And you'll be so happy. I mean, just read some of the testimonials that we have at the Marriage Foundation. Read the reviews on Breaking the Cycle and Lessons for a Happy Marriage so you get an idea of what other people think and how they feel about it, so you feel safe taking this direction. And I really want you to be happy. I mean, marriage is so undersold. People don't realize how amazing it is because they don't know how to work it. I hope this was useful to you. You could subscribe to the channel. You could share this video with others. Wouldn't hurt to share it with your husband, but you could also put it on Facebook or whatever the social media you're on, and you could like this and leave a comment if you wish. I'm here, we're here to serve you. So with that, blessings to you, blessings to your husband, and blessings to your family. God bless.